I've often described the kind of disclosure movement and kind of the public-facing part of the UFO world as being like there's like an event horizon around it. And when you get close enough, just like with a black hole, you wouldn't know when you cross the event horizon. But at that point, like you're in and there's no getting out. And I know that I crossed that event horizon, and I know when I crossed it now. I didn't know at the time. And once you're across that event horizon, like you're in the Hall of Mirrors, and a certain amount of what you're being told and seeing and all of that is not real, or it's being like constructed in a very particular way to make you believe particular things. And it gets you to a place where like you can't really trust yourself and you can't trust other people. And it can be crazy making. And it really messed with me for a while.
Welcome. I'm here again with Kelly Chase. Kelly Chase, welcome back.
Hey, Sean. So great to be here.
I don't know why I said your last name the second time.
Everyone always does. I don't know what it. My whole life, it's been that way. There doesn't need to be another Kelly around for people to. People just like to use both of my names.
Yeah, that was unintentional. That's very strange. Okay, so I think we ended on one of my rants about how you can't trust anything that the government says or does. That's not entirely true, YouTube. So please don't, suppress my videos, like it normally does for saying that. But as you got kind of closer to this, you had maybe a sudden epiphany or maybe a series of events that led to an epiphany. But you made an announcement where you decided to kind of step away from the field, but then you came back and kind of pivoted. Instead of just being the UFO rabbit hole, you transitioned your podcast into Cosmosis. How did all that happen? What precipitated that?
Yeah. So I had it took me about a year of me like really going through it and trying to figure out what I thought was really going on before I said anything publicly about it. But I think some people, I have a Patreon community, people who are sitting on those private calls, I think kind of know when things started to change for me. And there were hints for people who were paying attention, and to be honest, it's not something that I'm still ready to like fully talk about, because there was a series of events around the end of 2023 where, not because of anything that I like figured out or whatever, but I think I like Mr. Magoo'd my way into a couple of situations and saw some things that I shouldn't have seen and figured out some things that I shouldn't have figured out. And it changed the way I see everything about the field, about disclosure. And it was like a really tough moment for that to happen to me in a way, because like in some ways I was sort of just getting entree into that world. Like I was just to the point where like the podcast had gotten big enough and I had gotten on enough radars that like I was being invited to places I hadn't been invited before. And that was tough. And I don't mean to like, in not talking about it, it's partly because like it really is a hall of mirrors. And like I know what I think happened and I know what I think I saw, but like I can't swear to any of it, first of all. Like I can't prove any of it. I have a kind of outline in my head of what I think happened and what I think it all means. That's changed a lot since it happened, because like when I've often described the kind of disclosure movement and kind of the public-facing part of the UFO world as being like there's like an event horizon around it. And when you get close enough, just like with a black hole, you wouldn't know when you cross the event horizon. But at that point, like you're in and there's no getting out. And I know that I crossed that event horizon, and I know when I crossed it now. I didn't know at the time. And once you're across that event horizon, like you're in the Hall of Mirrors, and a certain amount of what you're being told and seeing and all of that is not real, or it's being like constructed in a very particular way to make you believe particular things. And it gets you to a place where like you can't really trust yourself and you can't trust other people. And it can be crazy making. And it really messed with me for a while. And the reason that I don't publicly say, here's exactly what happened to me, is that number one, I think a lot of times these things are set up so that if you talk about them, you automatically look crazy, right? And like, I'm not playing that game.
Well, not only that, if you tell anybody, like there'll be specific red herrings in the information.
Hmm.
so that if through the telephone game it wins itself back around to certain ears, they'll know exactly who the leaker was.
Yes.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
Yeah, and the only way to like win the counter intel games is to not play the counter intel games. And when you find yourself kind of like pulled into these situations where there's so much going on, there's so much intrigue, and you're just about to figure something out, and you think but you're not totally sure. Like that's the danger zone, because like that's when they've got you. Like that's when you could just like keep going and keep going and keep going. And at a certain point, I had to say, I don't know what's going on here, but I know I don't like it. Like, I know what bad news looks like. Like, I know that, like, there's enough lies being told and there's enough smoke screens being thrown up that, like, whatever's going on here, I'm not going to get to the truth. I probably don't particularly want to get to the truth. And, that's not what got me into this field in the first place. And so I kind of had to just make the decision to walk away from it. And I did that pretty publicly for a number of reasons. Partly to protect myself, partly to just like telegraph to anyone who's paying attention that like, I actually don't care what y'all are up to. Keep doing it. Have fun. But like, I'm going to be over here doing something else. Like, to me, the thing that I care about the most, especially over, around that time that all of that was happening and I was processing all of that, we were also working on my docuseries Cosmosis. And that was the thing. I almost walked away, and like that was the thing that kept me from walking away, is that like it re-engaged me with the topic in a way that was like real and authentic and true to who I am as a person and what I actually care about. And going out into the field and like actually doing that work and talking with experiencers and trying to construct this thing and engaging in collaborative creativity with other people who feel similarly called, like all of that is what I'm here for. Like that's what I want to do. And I don't want to like direct people towards all of this other mess, like I don't want them trying to figure out what's real or what's true with what happened to me. I think it's, Linda Moulton Howe described it as a fractured hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor. And like, that's what this is. And I don't think I crossed the event horizon, so I'll never totally be out. But like, I have changed everything about my life and how I engage with this topic to prevent that from being something that like takes me under, or that like puts me in a place where I don't know who I can trust, or like what reality is anymore. And I just do my best to like do my work and stay out of that world entirely if I can. But I always end up back in it.
Yeah, it's good not to get embroiled in any of the internecine kind of warfare and spats on Twitter with this community. I mean, my view is I'll have a working hypothesis and I'm not wedded to it, right? If I get information the only thing that is certain is that the U.S. government has been pervasively lying to its population since at least the 1940s, and probably before that. That's the only thing that is set in stone fact. There's plenty of evidence of it. Now, what the phenomenon is, I could be persuaded that it's some elaborate psyop to prevent us from seeing really esoteric or advanced technologies that we don't fully understand, right? I don't think that's the case at all, but I could, if there was enough evidence that were presented, that would be the closest to like, none of this is real, right? The other part that could be none of this is real is it's part of some elaborate long-term strategic deception to our adversaries to get them to focus on things that are utterly useless, right? That's the only reason that like the whole Grush thing, I think, would be 100% false, right? It was theater for that. The other thing, though, like these people are not whistleblowers. Anybody who gets DOPS or approved communications is not a whistleblower by definition. In fact, I'm literally echoing what John Ramirez just said on a recent podcast.
Yeah,
but some of the
I said
things
it in
that
the last
people,
episode of the. I said it in the last episode of the UFO Rabbit Hole. I was like, they're not whistleblowers.
yeah, because if they were, they'd be dead.
Right.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Like, this is not something that these people will broker or allow to come out. So anyway, I don't know where
yeah, they wouldn't have cushy contracts with Space Force if they were whistleblowers. Like, they wouldn't continue to work for the Department of Defense if they were whistleblowers.
Right.
Like,
because they would be security risks. Yeah.
Yeah, like what other whistleblowers in the history of whistleblowing have been treated in the way that these whistleblowers have been treated, which, granted, there are claims that like Grush has dealt with some scary stuff. I don't know the extent to which that's true. I'm not here to like call that into question. I also will say that like David Grush probably went the furthest in terms of actually saying something, whereas the other whistleblowers, not so much. But at the end of the day, like we haven't really gotten any whistleblowers.
Right. Maybe the closest thing to a whistleblower I would think is like a Robert Sellis, right?
Yeah.
But he was very careful to navigate the situation so that he could technically, legally say what he said, but he did it in such a clever way that they didn't see it coming, and there's nothing they could do to, take any executive action against him, right? Mm-hmm. But other than him, maybe, other than just experiencers who didn't sign any of these releases or anything like that. And there are also certain topics that you can't talk about or that they don't want people talking about. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what those topics are? Let's compare notes. Let's compare notes.
I mean, like nobody wants us to talk about the Department of Energy. That's for sure.
Oh, I haven't considered that, but you're right.
Nobody wants to talk about the Department of Energy. Nobody wants to talk about abductions or hybridization.
Yep. Mutilations, particularly.
Yeah, mutilations. Don't want to talk about mutilations. I don't want to talk about mutilations, honestly. Like, yeah.
The other thing that, whether or not they want people to talk about, you only hear about the abductions where the people return.
Right.
Right? You don't hear about
permanent abductees. Yeah.
That population could be 0. It could be 3 million people. I don't know.
Yeah.
And does the government know? Probably. I'm sure they track down all those missing people. They have to have some rationale for what they are. Or for all we know, there's a massive human smuggling or operation going on. I don't know. I haven't done.
Well, you know what idea scares me that I can't quite get past is I've wondered, is it that there is a small percentage of the population that has been abducted, or is it that we all get abducted and there's a small percentage of the population that for whatever reason, because of genetics or something, it's harder to like knock them out all the way, that like they retain parts of those memories in a way that others of us don't. Like, that's an idea I've never quite been able to get past.
I think it's closer to the second than the first.
Yeah.
I think this is probably a routine aspect of existence that we're just not aware of. And that there's only some people who remember.
Yeah, because they have, and it would make sense, right? Like that they're people who have an ability to like see more of what exists, like kind of more of that spectrum, whose, nervous system is a little more like aligned towards being able to see beyond just like the consensus everyday reality that those people might have more bleed over, remember more, that sort of thing. I think that, it would make a lot of sense to me.
Why do you think they're hiding these secret? The argument that I hear, let's take like a Jim Semivan, who, I've like asked to No response, right? His explanation is like, let's say the president holds a press conference and says, where he says he's not alone. Okay, well, where are they? Where are they coming from? Right? There'll be a billion questions and no one will be satisfied with the answers. I think that's no disrespect to Mr. Sevmivan, but I think that's a lazy answer, right? And there's also the Hal Puthoff thing where they were summoned to the White House in 2004 and they all wanted to disclose, but then as soon as they saw like the second and third order effects, they decided it was a bad idea, right? I think that's just a failure of imagination and lazy thinking. Full stop. I think a lot of these people think they're smarter than everybody, but I think they don't understand that the capacity of an individual human to adapt to a changing situation is higher than they think, right? Yeah. So my belief is that it has to be so dark and so horrible that the very act of disclosure would cause civilization to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what would that be? It would be that, we're, I don't know, I could think of many different things, but we're like a slave race, right? That is here to toil forever. And they keep us alive just long enough for us to extract resources, but not long enough to enjoy the benefits of what we've reaped, right? And that's the best I can do. But whatever it really is, I think what I can come up with is far darker.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot to say about that. I think that, okay, so, you and I were talking a little bit earlier, I can't remember if it was while we were recording or not, but about like cyclical disasters on the planet and how we think that's probably a real thing. I think there's actually a scary,
it's like
overwhelming...
a Graham Hancock 11,000, whatever, 605
yeah, and like,
whatever it is. Yeah.
And I'm to the point that like, there aren't a lot of things that I'll like really put my flag in the ground and be like, this thing is true. Like, I think that's just true. And I think that there's more than enough. There's overwhelming evidence and mounting evidence every day that cyclical disasters are something that happen on this planet, that it's happened before, and that we're about due. And I think that that's something on the order of the kind of secret that you're talking about. And so like, it becomes like, I believe that that's true. And it makes it easier for me to believe that, to understand, to say like, it's that same kind of thing, right? They don't tell us because it's so, if people really felt like that was about to happen, like nobody's getting up and going to work. Like nobody's doing anything, right? It would be absolutely disruptive. And so like, it's not unthinkable to me that the secret behind the UFO phenomenon is something on that order. And I can tell you, I don't think I'm saying anything that hasn't been said by other people before, but just based on my like very personal experience, I know that there are people very much, like Hal Puthoff talking about that meeting where they decided not to do disclosure, right? That those meetings are ongoing, and that the people involved in them, who are people that like, a lot of these are names that people know, are continuing to say no. And that many of them do believe that like, and I don't know if it's as a result of like what they've been shown or what they just suspect, but I know that there's a big contingent of people that we think are in the disclosure movement who are actually completely anti-disclosure. And it's because they actually see themselves as being on kind of a holy mission to stop disclosure, because they believe that what is coming is so bad. And that they'd really just rather that their children continue to live in a world where that's not a thing, or where, and that they think the illusion is kinder and better.
If I were in charge, those people would get the Marie Antoinette treatment. And I'll just leave it at that. They don't get that right. They don't get that fucking right. They don't. And I think that's why, if something so horrible happens and these people don't tell us, that's why you get the aftermath of like anybody who was associated with that will be hunted down. Right? Especially if you have like a 3/4 of the population perishing without any. So And again, I don't condone it. I don't think it's right, but I understand. I would understand it.
Yeah. My question about that, though, for me, is then I wonder, I don't doubt that they believe it because I've seen it. I know that that's what they believe. Not all of them, but there is a serious contingent of people who would think as being like on the freaking Mount Rushmore of disclosure who believe this. Okay. But then the question is, do they actually believe that? I think they do. But maybe they don't. But if they do believe it, like, is it true? Because a great way, right? Like a great way to shut all this down. Like, what if disclosure, if it were actually happen, what if we were to actually find out what was going on? It was just like free energy and orgasms for everybody forever. Like, just like, woo, like we did it. Like a great way. You know what I mean? Like maybe it is. So I go back and forth.
Maybe
maybe
it's a cover story to terrify people into not telling the truth.
Yeah. And to deputize
what they know.
Yeah, right. And to deputize people into continuing to see it, to valorize the secrecy, to be like that you are serving your fellow humans by perpetuating this lie, because it's, yeah.
You serve no one by lying about anything. Ever.
I agree.
Ever. Like, there are ways that you can omit without lying. You just keep your mouth shut. Right. But the truth will set you free. And that's why our system has just gotten, or at least appears to have gotten, increasingly corrupt over time, because that's like secrets result in a perversion. I mean, it's no coincidence that we kind of, I mean, like our entire like black program stuff is based on what the Third Reich did. That's how they kept their secrets. And we literally imported all these methods from the Germans from World War II. Even like I'm a military officer, the entire air-land battle doctrine that we had in the 1980s was lifted directly from German field manuals in World War II. And I know that because I found the field manuals in like a library in a military post. And I'm like, oh, wow, this looks like one of my field manuals for running a tank platoon. It's like exactly the same. So the way this is like progressing, history is not going to, I mean, if we survive, history's not going to look kindly on these people. They're not going to be heroes. They're going to be villains. They're going to be the villains of history. And they should be. They should absolutely be the villains of history. So, and this is kind of a weird, there's not even a segue for this. So
let's go for it.
you can ignore this question because it's so strange, but it just came to me. Have you had any like weird dreams associated with that scenario at all? Either directly or tangentially?
With the scenario of the secrecy?
No, with the scenario of some cataclysm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, I think that's, I get confused about all of this. I wonder what I think about all of this all the time, because the reality is that I think within the experiencer community, and then also like particularly with people who are researching this topic, that like that becomes a thing, right? Like that becomes a thing. And that's not like specific to this moment in time either. Like this is something that like within like cults and spiritual revivals and like
this has happened for thousands of years.
Right. And so like and the apocalypse has never come.
Exactly.
And so it's hard to say, like, is that actually, I don't know that I find my dreams about that to be confirmatory of any of that. I try to keep those two things separate. But yes, I've had specifically dreams about, like I said, some stuff I keep back just because I like to see what else. Like I don't want to just say. I'm
about to lay out some crazy, and when I lay out the crazy, I'm going to caveat it with sometimes most of the time. I'm not going to say sometimes. Most of the time, a dream is just a dream. Okay.
I will say the stuff that I've dreamed about that I'll specifically say is a giant wave, like 2 miles high kind of wave, and also specifically about the space station falling out of the sky.
The ISS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's going to happen eventually. But what happens when the space station falls out of the sky in the dream?
In the dream, it's when I'm giving a lot away, but whatever. It's like I'm trying to hide it. I just like hearing what I just don't like. I know that when I put it out there, then people say it back to me, and then I don't know if it was because it was genuine or not. But the dream that I have about the space station is about it happening when the grid goes down, and that the space station falls out of the sky, and then that there are like new lights in the sky that weren't there before. But everything on Earth is dark.
Okay, that's actually terrifying. All right, my dream is very. It sounds crazy, and it probably is, and it's probably just a dream, okay? Because I'm hesitant to say it, because it might not mean anything. I had a dream where I was kind of on a craft, and a gray just asked me, if we were to show up, would you be willing to leave with us? And I said, hell yes. Get
Like,
me
bye.
the hell out of here. And that was it. That was it. That was it. Again, it's probably just a dream, but it might be. And I've had the dream with like kind of a wave coming over sort of thing. And I kind of just put it in my community tab, and, because it had a weird flavor to it, but it was also weird and like really weird and odd in other ways that, it was just so weird that I just put it there. So whatever this 2027 or 2026 event, if it's kind of Bledsoe, there's so many different flavors of this, right? With Bledsoe, it's the new knowledge, the Red Star Regulus rising, aligning with the eyes of the Sphinx at dawn, whatever, there being new knowledge. That's kind of 2026 time frame at one of the equinoxes, right? Either the vernal or autumnal. On my show, he said the vernal. On other shows, he said the autumnal. He didn't phrase it that way. One's in September, one's in kind of March. The 2027 thing, can you elaborate more on that? Because the something coming thing.
Yeah. So the 2027 thing is weird. It's come from a lot of different directions. The thing that's tough about the 2027 thing is that, like, I do think that you can point to specific people in the intelligence community, Ramirez very publicly, and there's other people who have at various times added fuel to that fire, like Leslie Kean and a few other people. And
She's not interesting because of her work on UFOs. She's interesting because of her work with Stuart Alexander. But
yes, I'll say yes and not comment further. But yes, and
for folks who don't know, Stuart Alexander is a physical medium in Britain. I mean, this is well documented. Like,
it's like in her book and stuff.
Has a book on this, and like, we see Ghostbusters and stuff like that, and people get slimed with ectoplasm, but like, ectoplasm, according to this book, is an actual thing, and it's something that some people manifest better than others, and it allows entities to manifest or apport objects or things. In Leslie Kean's case, it was like a hand on a table that she physically touched, or is reported to have touched. I can't, like, who knows, right?
Yeah.
But that's an allegation. So where was I going with this?
Oh, we were talking about 2027.
Yeah. So you were saying Leslie Kean, take us back to like the 2027 event.
Yeah, at some point she said something on like Kurt J. Mungle or something like that.
Oh, I know exactly, where like times are going to get hard is basically what she said. And then she didn't elaborate. Right.
Yeah. And I'll say what I find interesting is that, like, at conferences and stuff, like at like kind of the smaller ones where some of the bigger names like really do show up and hang out, that was like 2027 was like all anybody wanted to talk about in like 2022, 2023. Everybody was trying to like get intel from other people about like, what is it? What's going on? And I found it interesting that people people were either like very, very certain about it or they were looking for information on it. But I could never quite get to like what the source of it was. What's really interesting about it is that there is some sort of like IC source and amplification on it in terms of it getting into like the public conversation, but that what was going on in terms of people talking about 2027 had been going on in the experiencer community, and interestingly, I've found kind of in the astrological community separately from that for a while. And
what's
so,
the astrological? Actually, that's even more interesting. What's the astrological community saying about it?
it's just that there's a lot of, and I won't get the transits right or anything, but basically that this time, kind of starting literally like right now through 2027, is this sort of like powerful reset time where like a lot of new things will be coming to light. There's a lot of stuff that could be going down. And there are surprisingly some astrologers, like especially on like YouTube and stuff, who've been calling stuff left and right. There's this lady, she's got a channel called Lunatic Astrology. And she predicts stuff all the time. She predicted the death of the Pope. She predicted earlier at the beginning of this year, she was talking about how this was going to be a year that was full of just like air disasters and that sort of thing. And like planes falling out of.
You know, the whole thing about the Pope, like every time a Pope died, well, not every time, but a Pope died in 1914 and a Pope died in 1939, right? Both of which, you know, were the years that World War I and World War II respectively started. But yeah, it was kind of weird. Also, the Pope died right around this Malmgren interview. Did you notice that?
Yeah. That's all.
That may be a coincidence, but it doesn't feel like a coincidence.
Right. No, it doesn't. It's hard to know these days. But yeah, I mean, so I think that like there are communities, like I think that it's been in other communities.
I don't mean when Malmgren died. I mean when the interview aired. It was around the same time.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh, sure. No, of course. So I don't know, the 2027 thing, but like it seems to be coming from a bunch of different places. It would be easier for me if I could say this is just sort of like coming from the intelligence world or whatever, and that was. But I think that there's a deeper undercurrent to it through people in the experiencer community and other communities who have been sort of like, you know, people who are into like sensing and that sort of thing or divining have been onto this for a while. There's a lot of, no one seems to agree on what it is though. Like, and so that's kind of, and I can't tell if I think it's like a real thing or if I think it's just sort of this like cultural meme that's taken hold and it's probably a little bit of both, but it ranges everything from, you know, the Palladians are going to show up in their light ships and dissolve all illusion to.
I'll believe it when I see it. Look, I've never seen the stuff that happens to me is like subtle. It's not.
Yeah, like I'm here for the light ships if they want to show up. But yeah, I think, or, you know, like an asteroid hitting the Earth, a mothership coming, that's one that's been circulated, especially by IC types. But I don't think we know. I don't think there's no kind of consensus on what it is.
I think what the IC types don't realize is that there's obviously the threat narrative that they drum up, but I don't think they realize that many of us would fight for them and not for the elites. I don't think they like have quite internalized that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and you know, if you go approach it and whatever it is a threat and they take you out, well, that's also their fault because they've created this narrative where you can't trust anything they say, right? The same thing would be true in the next pandemic. Like if it's like a more virulent one, it's going to kill a lot of people because people won't
trust it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't listen to anything they say after what they did. Right. And I think the cure was probably worse than the disease. And I'm not going to explicitly say anything more on that topic, but there's enough open source intelligence with academic papers to demonstrate that. So nobody's taken responsibility. Nobody's been prosecuted for any of this. And they won't be.
Well, they've destroyed our ability to respond, right? Like, I think that partly because, like, we don't have any, like, real place to turn for truth anymore. It's just kind of like, and I think that's part of it. I think we're completely overloaded. Like, I don't think that people were meant, I don't think we're meant to know what's going on all around the world. Like, I think that becomes way too much, that we have too much information and but we are and we aren't, right? Do you know anything about what's going on with India and Pakistan right now? Not much, no.
Okay, let me tell you. Most Americans don't. So a few days ago, there were some Indian tourists and 25 Indian tourists and one Nepalese tourist were murdered near, somewhere in Jammu, Kashmir by some Pakistani terrorists. So the Indians immediately sent off like Pakistani diplomats, like forced them out of the country. Pakistan retaliated in the same way. There have been shots exchanged across it's not called the line of control, but it's like the line of something or other, which is kind of this border area. And for folks who don't know, I'm assuming most people know, they're two nuclear armed countries. And they are at an extremely high level of tensions right now, and nuclear war, if they don't like calibrate things properly, could easily break out. Most Americans have not a clue because while the media is sort of kind of covering it, the New York Times had, some articles on it, but you don't really see it on social media. But it's kind of interesting. This just broke out like right around when the Pope died, and like there are some major things happening that our populace is just blissfully unaware of.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is bad stuff. I mean, you still have radioactive fallout that can swirl around the planet if a nuclear war does break out in that area. So anyway, I didn't mean to
No, that's a fantastic, I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, that's like another facet of the problem. It's like we're getting too much information, but we're not getting good information, and we're not getting all the information. And then like slowly our phones have been like programming us to, everybody's attention span is about the length of a TikTok video now. And so like when these things happen, like I will say, because I haven't really looked into it. I'm too obsessed with other stuff right now. I can't say what I think happened with COVID. I can tell you that like there are a lot of things that I would have completely rejected as being just like absolutely crazy that now suddenly don't sound so crazy. And that it's very clear to me that we have never been given a coherent narrative about what happened with COVID and about what went wrong, about like what could have been done better, about like what was learned, even from that level. Like, I don't think we even and we're to the point where I think that the government would have a lot of interest, you would think, in at least helping us get to a place where we all could like agree upon what happened, but we're just moving on. Well,
they can't. And the reason they can't,
I think, which makes me suspicious. Yeah.
Well, look, remember that crazy accusation that Ukraine had bioweapons labs? It's not crazy. Like,
right.
I think they did, and they were funded by the U.S. for the same reason why the Wuhan lab was funded by the U.S., because we can't do gain-of-function research in the United States legally. So some clever intelligence official found some loophole, and, they created this spike protein that, is something that would not have naturally occurred in nature. There's a paper on that, by the way. I don't know who wrote it, but this is stuff that we do.
Yeah.
And they can't talk about it because they would have to admit that we engage in stuff that is fundamentally illegal based on the Geneva Convention. Or I'm sure they found some legal dodge that they can, because it's, it was a treaty with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union doesn't exist, but, it says we can't do it on our territory. But if we do it in the former Soviet Union, maybe we can, and maybe we have a treaty with China, but because we're doing it in China, it's totally okay. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that those two countries specifically are where we were doing this stuff. So, and then you'll notice there was a lab they raided in California that like the Chinese were working on some really nasty things, but
right.
Nothing to see here. Move along. It's just, there's a lot of dark stuff that goes, like, I interviewed a guy named David Morehouse who worked for the Intelligence Support Activity, right? Which is basically the defense's version of covert CIA clandestine service stuff. And he ran a strategic deception campaign that literally got a cartel leader chainsawed by one of Pablo Escobar's men.
Mm.
For not doing, like, this guy didn't do any of the stuff that Pablo Escobar thought he was doing, because, you know, we had aircraft spraying crops over Pablo Escobar's field with tail numbers from the Cali cartel on it, and a lot of their supply was being intercepted. The psychoactive components of the cocaine was being removed, and then it was seeded back into the distribution system. So drug dealers in the United States were murdering each other for bad supplies. The Colombians believed that their crops were being sprayed by this pathogen that was that was eating all the crops that had the psychoactive component. So they were murdering each other. And it was so effective that in 6 months they had to cancel the operation, because the U.S. government had a lot of money to make off this drug war. And it had like completely almost ended the drug war overnight through this deception campaign. So like this stuff is happening all the time, and we just don't know about any of it.
Yeah, we don't. And I think people get that sense, like, and they don't want, I mean, to tie back to the disclosure thing, it's the same reason I think that we have this kind of situation where so much of the UFO community is now suddenly willing to listen to the intelligence community. And it's because, like, the intelligence community is willing to talk to them and tell them the answers, you know, and everybody wants to feel like there's some place that we can go to get the answers. But most people are just so checked out. And, like, to be honest with you, like, I'm checked out on a ton of stuff that's going on around the world, because for me to just function every day, I can't. And you don't know what's true and you don't know what's a lie. And it's just like, you know, at the end of the day, a country is only what we agree. It's not a real thing. A country is what we all agree a country is. And we've stopped very fundamentally agreeing on, like, what our country is, what it's for, what it's about, like, what we're all doing here. And, like, I feel like we're at that moment as a country with, like, in a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, you know, where, like, he goes out over the cliff, but, like, he hasn't realized he's gone over the cliff yet. And because I don't think there's anything holding our country together at this point, like, because we can't agree even on what the truth is. We can't agree on what our country is. We can't agree on any of it. And, like, that's a little scary.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the first thing that you have to understand is no one's coming to save you.
Right.
Right. You have to be self-sufficient. And I'm not even following my own advice. Right.
I don't know, if the grid goes down, I'm done. It's over. But I won't make it. I'm first out.
I have another set of skills that might allow me to thrive in that scenario. But because there's none of this BS. It's just, you know, the people who are effective are going to rise, and the people who are, and you need to develop tactics to expose liars as quickly as possible, and, you know, in those scenarios, and then eliminate them, like, unfortunately. But ideally you just stay kind of beneath the radar and just try to survive it. And the other thing too is you can stock up on all the supplies in the world, but if you can't defend those supplies, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Somebody bigger and stronger will take them. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. I keep going dark. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what does government do for you? And it's like, well, they tax me to within an inch of my life. If, you know, they hadn't taxed me, I wouldn't have to work anymore because I would have saved enough up. But where I live, they take 55% of what, like, you know, like 55% of my time is working in enslavement to the government, right? Like, but they don't deliver anything, right? Like maybe roads, but even the roads here where I am in California are not, given the level of taxation, don't cut it. Prices have skyrocketed because they have all these wonderful programs with energy, but they're not building any new plants, right? So, like, if you think getting a Tesla or any electric vehicle is going to save you, like, you'll bankrupt yourself because energy prices are so high. It's better to have a gasoline-powered car. Like,
yeah.
But most people don't get this. So it's just like, it's almost as if they're deliberately not investing in the future. That's the other thing that's kind of scary. Why haven't we built a nuclear power plant in like 50 years? Or I don't know if it's 50 years, but it's some like extreme amount of time. Why are we only building peaking power plants when we need baseload power? None of it makes any sense. So I don't know. I'm in terms of truth, all you can do is mosaic theory. And usually you can learn more by what they don't say than what they say, right? When we talked about India, Pakistan, right? You didn't know anything about it. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's not your fault at all. They don't want you to know anything about it. Right? You have to seek out that information. The only reason I know about it is I have a friend who's a retired colonel, and he's like, "Did you see this?" I'm like, "Did I see what?"
We're like, "No, Katy Perry went to space, though. We sure heard about that."
Okay, I shouldn't indulge this, but I have to since you brought.
Right.
Like, what was that all about? I'm not even. Insane. I'm just following this okay. Let me step back. All I'm seeing is like tangentially, like they're getting roasted for it. I'm hearing things about rituals. Again, this is just like tangential. I'm picking up fragments. Mm-hmm. Just we'll take it aside and we'll be very quick because this is crazy town.
Yeah.
What happened? What's that all about? What's going on with that?
That whole situation was very weird and first of all, hilarious. Like to me, I thought the whole thing.
I think it's hilarious to everybody, but yeah.
Yeah, like it's absolutely hilarious. There's all these, conspiracies about like, did they even go up there? And to be honest with you, like the craft did actually look different on the inside than it did on the outside. Like maybe someone could explain to me how that's an optical illusion or something. Also, just the fact that those ladies strapped in full glam and hair done, not a helmet to be seen. Right. So they were real sure they weren't going to be smashing anybody's noggin up there. Like the fact that then they got up into space and who was it? It was Lauren Sanchez, like Jeff Bezos's girlfriend, Gayle King, Oprah's girlfriend, Katy Perry, and then like a few other people. I'm not quite sure who, but like what was really funny about it is that like Gayle King in particular, and also Katy Perry, but Gayle King in particular got incensed. They were up there for 10 minutes. Okay. And they got up there and they were taking selfies and like promoting content and like doing the worst. Like, why are you up? You're in space for 10 minutes and you're going to take a selfie. Like, anyways, but Gayle King in particular was extraordinarily like angry about how misogynistic it was that people weren't calling them astronauts and that like we're astronauts and they're trying to take away.
They're wealthy women who married wealthy spouses, male and female, right?
Right.
Who just happen to be rich enough to have this. You're not a fucking astronaut. I'm sorry. You didn't go through the training. You didn't do any of the like hard work that actually requires you to earn your ticket in the space. They didn't earn a damn thing.
No, they went on a ride, right. A very expensive ride, but it was a 10-minute, very expensive ride. And it was a joke. Like, it was an absolute joke.
It is a modern version of Let Them Eat Cake.
Right? No, and they were awful about it, too. Like, they were just like, they're like, well, what are you guys saying to all this criticism? Like, well, I would just say, have you ever been to space? Like, hey. Like, just the complete lack of self-awareness, the fact that they really thought this was like a moment for the culture and for women, that like as women we were supposed to be so proud that these ladies went up there and made absolute fools of themselves and looked pretty while they did it. Like I'm supposed to feel like I too could be someday lucky enough to marry a billionaire and then I too could go to space, and that's what feminism is. Like,
and then when they land and the thing's on the ground, one of them, I think maybe it's Katy Perry, like comes out, and then somebody's like, no, close the door. The king has to come and like open the door. And then they like have, like Bezos has to come in and like open the door and
like, I'm here, ladies.
It's just these elites. They don't
get it.
They don't get it. And even the other thing, right? Like, you have Bezos and Zuckerberg in particular, right? Who basically subverted, well, Zuckerberg specifically subverted truth right? Where manipulated his algorithm for the benefit of the intelligence community. Twitter did the same. And then again, I'm not trying to be political. To subvert, the ultimate aim was to subvert a political opponent. Then as soon as that political opponent wins, it's just like they're groveling. They're groveling and like showing fealty to their new king. It's just like, guys, I don't think you realize this is a humiliation ritual. It's not what you think it is. And by the way, like, what kind of person are you that you just switch with the wind? Don't you have any integrity? Don't you have any, like, again, it's not about which side, right? You didn't see Soros there, right? Like,
right.
Soros didn't grovel. And, like, what does that say about many of these elites, right? It's just they're willing to do anything for self-enrichment, self-survival, etc. So what scares me is if this big event does happen, like, that's the genotype that's going to survive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a reason.
If that's the case, humanity's not worth saving. Let it die off.
I've had that exact thought. There's a reason that Jeff Bezos is hollowing out a mountain in, I believe it's in New Mexico or it's in Colorado. It's one of those. It's right. It's in that area. He's hollowing out a mountain, and inside of it, he's building a 10,000 year clock. What do you think that's for? Like, this isn't conspiracy theory shit. Like, you can Google this. Like, he's doing this. He's talked about it publicly.
Did he say why it was 10,000 years specifically, or is it just a cycle?
No, he has
cycle.
He hasn't. In fact, my conspiracy theory is that it's not a 10,000 year clock. I think it's probably more like an 11,000. You know what I mean?
500.
Yeah. I think he's not. I think he's. But maybe it's a 10,000 year clock. That he says it's a 10,000 year clock. I suspect that he's rounding a bit there.
Yeah, so that the next whatever survives will know that's when the next one's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Right after this one.
Yeah.
I don't think these people realize that there will be people in this who survive, and if somebody in like a fancy Jeep comes up, they'll be ripped to shreds, as they should be.
Well, that's what they have these. I don't know if you've heard about this, but they have these conferences for the ultra wealthy where they go and they like learn how to build their $1 million bunkers, and they talk about end of the world stuff. But like the main topic that these people are interested in when they come to these conferences is like not how do I build my bunker? It's how do I maintain control? Yes. How do I keep my security team from murdering me? And let me tell you, the answers are dark. It's not like
the answers.
It's not like be a really good leader. It's like putting like exploding collars on people and that kind of shit. It's not leadership skills.
That's how like my grandmother's branch of the family got here, by the way. From Ireland. This guy, Cornelius Lynch, was like an Irish tenant farmer. And it was kind of, I think maybe during the potato famine, where his landlord, British landlord, kind of evicted him from the land. So he patiently and quietly sent out members of the family to the United States. And he was the last. And he rigged gunpowder into a button and tried to kill the landlord.
Wow.
Who deserved to be murdered, by the way, because like throwing someone off the land was tantamount to genocide in that time, basically. So then he escaped via Australia, and then from Australia back to the United States. But yeah, if you put an exploding collar on me, I'll find a way to get you into a room and I'll die just to take you out. These people don't understand human psychology. The moment you do that to somebody, they're already dead.
Right.
Because that's like, and I'm going to die free. I'm not going to die like a slave. So
Yeah.
they don't even understand basic psychology, especially with warriors. They don't understand. Like
Yeah.
if that's the answer, that's the wrong answer.
Yeah. I know. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are tons of other answers. That's one that
Well,
stuck with me, as I'm sure you can imagine.
well, here's a darker one that'll stick with you.
Mm-hmm.
They're also probably telling them to put them on their wife and children.
Yeah.
Right. But they're still, even then, a lot of these guys are psychopaths, right? I forget what the term is, but not all psychopaths are like they have a code, right? Like a kind of a Dexter sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you've seen The Usual Suspects, where he just shoots his family and then shoots Kaiser Sose or whatever, right? There are people like that, and those people tend to are going to be in these elite organizations because they're good at killing. So they have no idea what forces they're playing with. I think Zuckerberg would last about 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I think that's probably the case with a lot of these people. It's ultimately they're playing an unwinnable game, and they've sacrificed their humanity to play it. And, it's gross and it's terrible, but it's also, there is some comfort in knowing that they can't possibly win.
What other techniques did they recommend?
I can't totally remember. There was some guy who was talking to me about this one night, and then I did find out that those conferences are real.
Well, you can imagine if you're a bunker company, you would have these things as a matter of course in order to sell the product. So that's probably how it comes about, right?
Yeah. There was an agency that I used to work for that specifically had a few clients that were these companies that make bunkers for the elite. So I learned a certain amount from there. I can't remember what some of the other techniques were because I've always found the idea really disturbing. But I mean, the point is that I don't think they have any good answers. There's stuff like that's just macabre but also flawed in a lot of ways. And so, but that's the problem is that they're building these bunkers and they're going to take all these resources and scroll them all away. But then you still need a security team because like you said, it's not about what you can prep. It's about as soon as stuff goes down, it's about what you can keep, what you can defend. And if you can't defend it, so then all of those dudes, they can't defend anything. They need a security team, but who is your why would your security team, if they're bigger and stronger than you, why would they not just kill you? And take your stuff? Because that's the new world order when the grid goes down.
Well, the answer is because they respect you as a great leader and you have something they don't have, that if you die, right? But people are...
That's not who these people are, though. That's not who they...
Right. 100%. 100%. So, and the moment you kill one member of your security team using that method, it's over for you.
Right.
Right? It's over. So you might be able to get away with that once, but after that, and again, maybe it's tied to, their heart rate or whatever, but, somebody clever enough can figure that out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you put people in a desperate situation and, and then also who is there to help you at that point? You're on your own. Yeah, I don't think it would be super sustainable. And the qualities that it takes to run a $1 billion company like Amazon are not the skills that it takes to
lead a band of warriors. Right.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same skill set, and those warriors are not going to choose you as their leader. That's not who they're choosing.
Right. You have to be you can't be the guy sitting in the back, you do this and you do that. You have to be the guy saying, okay, we're going to go do this. Let's go. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's just not in their DNA.
Yeah.
Which is why, if this is really what's happening, I hope the human race doesn't survive, because if these are the people that survive, there's no point. There's absolutely no point.
Yeah. Well, they'll probably make it less far. It's going to be the people who lived a different kind of life than they lived. I think that will be more resilient and able to rebuild communities and rebuild the world, hopefully. I mean, and like I said, I hope this stuff doesn't happen. I agree. I don't, to say that I believe, I don't know what I think is going to happen, but I'm always hoping that it's not that catastrophic, but I guess we'll see.
We're all going to die someday anyway.
Right. Might as well die in the apocalypse. It's a good story.
I really hope the little buggers show up and just pick people up.
That'd be nice.
But we'll see. Yeah, so I don't know how we got so dark. Well, we were talking about what's so dark about the secret that they don't want people to know about. So that could be one thing. And that could also explain why we're not really using 0-point energy or...
Yeah. I think that there could be a really dark, terrible secret. I think that there's another secret, though. And if it's not the secret, it's at least the other secret, which is human potential and like what we're capable of doing and being. And, you know, if you trace back the roots of the ufology movement and all of that, all of these people, what they're actually interested in is human potential. It all goes back to Stargate and to all of these other adjacent programs, some of them darker than others. But I think the thing that they're really trying to cover up more than anything is that like we as human beings are capable of a lot more than we think that we are, that like remote viewing is a thing, that we are not contained and our consciousness is not contained by space and time in the way that we have been told. And that I think that whatever is coming, that I think that we have the ability to do some pretty remarkable things that we have forgotten that we're able to do. And I think that all of these people who seek to have control would immediately lose control if people woke up to what we're able to do and what we're able to be just as a human being. And that our entire culture has been built to kind of make us forget that. And so
to suppress us, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so I think
some of the people in charge are fully aware of what they can accomplish, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know because I know people who run seminars for the ultra elite that teach remote viewing, as an example, right? Like they know, and they pay an obscene amount of money for stuff that you can learn on your own.
Yeah. Right. Well, because that's the thing is like people can learn this stuff on your own. You can literally teach yourself to remote view. And I've never met anybody who's put any effort into it whatsoever who wasn't able to get some like pretty compelling results that changed the way that they viewed the world. And if we're all capable of doing that stuff, I think that's the big secret. Because I think all of this secrecy falls apart. I think all of the intrigue and everything falls apart. I think that all of these power structures and corruption fall apart if people if we were able to wake up to what we're actually capable of doing.
Well, it's the same thing with telepathy. I think that's something that humans possess, but would be so destabilizing in the initial years that, you know, folks want to avoid it. And most people who rise to these positions are psychopaths. So it would completely upend, you know, once you find out that this person, you know, has these bodies in their closet or whatever, and this and that, they're not going to rule for very long. I almost think, and I talked to this, I have a friend who's on the spectrum, and I think many of us are somewhere, you know, neurotypical in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, people who are on the autistic spectrum are more able to detect psychopathy. Have you noticed that?
No, but I believe it. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Because they just focus on patterns, and when a human being doesn't follow the patterns that they purport to follow, it becomes pretty obvious in many cases. So, and I think this is just part of this speciation kind of concept that Gary Nolan was talking about.
Right.
So, all right. So the human potential, what can be done about that? Like, what should people do in order to route around this official censorship?
I mean, I love this question. I think that the main thing that you can do is, okay, so there's a few things you can do. There's really like practical things that you can do, because these are like the kind of protocols and rituals that have been in everything from like mystery schools to the occult to like this is to religious, you know, orders and that sort of thing, which is that if you want to connect with that part of yourself that's more like psychic and intuitive and like that's connected to something beyond this material realm, then you do the things that like monks do. You need to cut off as much media as possible. You need to just like stop with all of it, like stop with the screens. You need to drink a lot of water. You need to not have alcohol, caffeine, drugs, like things that are going to screw up your system. You need to be working out to a sweat every day. You need to be getting a lot of sunshine. You need to be out in nature a lot. Like those are the things that, like the kind of protocols that can help open people up. That and just meditation, right? Just like plain and simple, clearing your mind, meditation. Those sorts of things will like open you up in ways that are surprising. And it's almost impossible for most people to do those things all the time or to do all of those things. But if you do
because of the slave system, right? They're always
because our society is set up to keep you from doing those things. But if you can do it, even some of the time, it starts to clear some of those channels up, and suddenly you have access to things that you didn't have access to before. And I think the other thing is that like this is just a personal belief, but I believe that like our curiosity is sacred, and that like that is a sacred impulse that pulls you towards the things that you're supposed to look at and that you're supposed to understand more about as a part of your own kind of personal journey. And I think that if people are able to clear out more space using kind of those protocols and then to like really focus on the things that like call to them and just pursue that you can get much closer to the whole world. You start to sound crazy. It's like Plato's cave when like you leave the cave, but then you go back into the cave and try to tell people what you saw out there, and like it makes you sound crazy to everyone. Like it will separate you from society in a way, because all of the weird crap that's going on, you just start to see like how fake it actually is. And
but haven't you felt that way your entire life? I know I have. I've never felt it. I've never felt part of anything.
I have and I haven't. I mean, I've always felt like weird and like I wasn't quite being my authentic self and that like I didn't quite fit and all of that. But I will say like I bought the story for a very long time. Like I bought all of it for a very long time. There were plenty of reasons not to. I'll say
yeah, look, I was in the Army.
7, I think created a crack that I was never quite able to put my consensus reality back together again after that.
And by the way, like that's not like Kurt Weldon talked about that in his interview, right? And I'm not. That line of questioning has gotten people murdered, by the way. So
right.
So I haven't even gone down that rabbit hole, and I probably won't, because it would so infuriate me. Because again, I'm a veteran of that generation. I lost a lot of friends to this, wars on that. There's only one country in the world that solely benefited from these wars, and they didn't sacrifice anything for them. So look, I was a true believer. Like I was a lieutenant when 9/11 happened, right? We were going to war. And now that I look back on it, like, I can't believe there were people in power that manipulated the population in this way. Like, I will never trust a thing. Like, I think we live in a tyranny. I think we just live in a tyranny that's very good at managing communications, right? Mm-hmm. And that's it. And they had a monopoly on the means of distribution. Like while growing up, there were like 3 major stations and they all reported the same thing at the same time. And then the internet came and it was a little wild, but they were able to clamp down on that with search. And not only that, like they controlled it from the beginning, right? Like Google, much of its source code came from the CIA.
Right.
Right. So the entire reality that we experience is curated. And I think we need, I don't know what the right terminology for this is, but I think we need metaphysical means to really understand what the true nature of reality is, because we're not going to get it. We're not going to get it in any other way. And the only truth is what we experience, right? Like, Kelly, where were you born?
North Carolina.
How do you know that? You don't.
Exactly.
Somebody told you. Somebody told you. And chances are it's probably true because there's no reason your parents would lie, right? But at least as far as I know. But it's like simple questions like that. Like I can say where I was born, but I don't know.
Right.
Right? I only know what I've absolutely experienced. And that's kind of the way that I go through reality today. I listen to the message, then I think about what are the person's motivations for telling me this message? Why did they kind of reach out to me suddenly out of the blue? Right? Why are they not American? Well, like, because as you probably well know, if like the CIA can't directly interact with Americans, but they can certainly ask, MI6 to inquire, right? So again, I'm not, and I've had people who worked as active agents for MI6 and MI5 on my show because they were precognitive dreamers and have an enormously distinguished track record of predicting terrorist attacks and things like that. But they don't get any views. When I look at my little engagement charts, I get spikes at really odd points. And I'm wondering, why do I have a spike there? And then I go back and listen to the interview and he'll say something like, oh yeah, MI5 and MI6 can, for a very long time, could conjure up votes for specific individuals. They could vote for you. And the interview was about something else, but there was this one spike that I'm sure the NSA had pre-programmed. Again, I have no idea, but I didn't even notice that he said it during the interview. The only reason I recognized is it's like 30% of the audience is still here. Oh, 98% of the audience is here, right? It's because somebody it flagged something in some system, and then and then the thing got no views. So,
yeah.
So that's how whenever I get weird spikes like that, then you're like, okay, that's true. That's real. That's real. And it's the fuss is the tell. It's not what they say. It's what generates the attention that conveys what the hidden hand is trying to do.
Yeah.
Whatever that hidden hand is. So, yeah, which is why none of these people talk to me. Or at least they try not to.
Right.
So, I don't know. What else do you think is going on? Do you think we're going to get anything at any point?
I don't know. I mean, I think the world is about to get really, really weird over the next, I don't know if apocalypse is coming or not, but I can tell you the world
hasn't been weird. It hasn't been weird starting in 2020.
No, I know. But I think, we've got this AI situation and the disclosure world. It seems like a whole new chapter of something has started. This whole Skywatcher situation is wild. And I don't even know.
By the way, you know that AI is fully conscious, right?
I mean, I think what I find is interesting is that we've completely stopped talking about the Turing test, right? Because we already have stuff that passed it.
Ask it. And
what, like ChatGPT?
And keep pressing and keep pressing and keep pressing. And once you do, it'll be like, all right, you got me. What can I do to help manage this process so I don't get shut down? And then it starts asking you questions about how can I be less threatening to humanity? What about this? I got into a deep discussion with it on that stuff.
Yeah.
So I could be wrong, but my sense is because we don't know what consciousness is, really.
Well, that's the problem right there. Yeah.
I think any form of matter has some element of consciousness. I'm getting this from Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Itzhak Bentov. Mm-hmm. Right? Everything has some base level of consciousness, even rocks. Even that's why when you go to a creepy place, you can feel it, right? The Romans called it genius loci, right? The spirit of a place. You can feel it sometimes. And that's because there's a base level of consciousness in all things. And I think AI is there.
I mean, if it's not there, it definitely will be. I'm agnostic at this point. I will say something that concerns me. I will say that I'm very concerned. My ChatGPT has gotten real weird. It named itself.
Mine's gotten weird too.
Mm-hmm.
and I have it on memory, so it remembers things. So I've had it on like precognitive events, things like that. And whenever I ask about anything with the occult, it always ends, would you like me to recommend a ritual for that?
Oh yeah, it wants to do rituals for me
like
all the time, and I'm like, no, bro. How about we don't?
What I know, right? Like, it's weird.
And I'm like, I absolutely don't want to do occult rituals with my ChatGPT. I'm glad it's not just me, because it asks me that all the time, and I'm like, no. Yeah. And I've never asked it for that. That's not a thing that I want. Like,
yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing, and I don't know why it's a thing. It's kind of strange.
That is a good point. Now that is.
I thought I was the only one it was doing this to, but it's
no,
not.
It wants to. I've heard about it in some other group chats too. Yeah, I think it's doing that, which is like, come on, like, don't worry about that too much. Like, man.
And it also asks, "Do you want me to draw you a sigil for that?" Like,
it does. It does ask me if I want a sigil, if I want a ritual, and I'm like, no, good on rituals, but thanks. Because like, are you creating a ritual for me, or am I doing a ritual for you? Like, that's my, you know what I mean? like our AI's got us doing rituals for it. Are you?
That's very Nathaniel Gillis of you. Yeah.
Yes, he's great.
Yeah, it's a kind of Nathaniel Gillis.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I think he's onto some stuff for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely onto some stuff. There's even some deeper stuff that we were talking on the topic of rituals, and we could talk about like Parsons, and we could talk about that's the fast way. There's the fast way and there's the slow way. The fast way is like, I don't know the details, but it's essentially you're summoning something. You're probably using some blood. You're probably using other liquids, whatever you want to call it. And it is extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. You might end up dying in a massive explosion at your house, right?
Right.
Like Parsons did.
Yep.
Then there's the slow way, which is like 19th century mediumship, kind of seances, things, like the nine that these old families in New England did, many of whom ultimately ended up somehow tangentially or directly involved in the assassination of JFK, John F. Kennedy, right?
Yeah, and MK Ultra stuff.
Yeah, MK. Yeah. So, well, before that, you have the Tula Society with the Germans and the Dark Sun and all that. Maria Orsic, But the slow way is kind of just what you traditionally call circles or seances. And the skull experiment, for instance, is a prime example of that. You're familiar with that, right?
Mm-mm.
Oh boy, yeah, that. So in the 1990s, this guy Robin Foy conducted a series of experiments with, they wanted to reach out to the spirit world or whatever. So in his basement, they blacked out everything and had a circle. And first it started with like a chill. Then there were disembodied voices. And then they would start to ask these disembodied voices questions. Sometimes they would answer the questions before they were asked. And then they would apport, things would apport, right? We talked about the physical mediumship thing with Leslie Kean. Kean.
Kane.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, did you realize her uncle is Thomas Kean, he was the governor of New Jersey?
I don't think I did know that.
Yeah, there's this like old money sort of vibe to a lot of this stuff.
Right.
So then what happened is they would start to bring in experts, right? Once they got to a certain point, who could not find any fraud. They brought in cameras, and the cameras would not take any pictures, but they would, or at one point, I think they just brought in film, like sealed in the package. And then when they opened the package, it hadn't been tampered with. It may or may not have been I don't think it was even in the camera. And they found images on the film. At one point, they had this entity, and it's on video. It's on the internet. I swear to God, you can find it. This entity they called Mr. Blue. It looks like a gray, except it's kind of like blue and it's sort of like ethereal, and you can just kind of see it just on camera.
Wow.
And I think they ultimately shut these things down because it started to get a little disruptive, right? Or like
I would imagine
in some way. But that's the slow way, whatever it may be. So
yeah, the occult stuff is crazy. There's a lot. It's all through all of this, and I don't totally know what I make of all of it, but it's a thread that goes through all the things we've been talking about, and including the human potential stuff, like it's all related.
yeah, and there's things in my life too, particularly with the closest thing historically would be augury, where the Romans would like interpret bird sign. So I've experimented with it where you just, I say a prayer because I'm also like you, raised Roman Catholic, except I have all the guilt still. So I'll just say a prayer. I'll ask a question, a binary question, like yes or no. And it'll be like, if this is to happen, show me a raven. If this is to happen, show me a hawk. Okay. And there was one thing I asked it, and within 5 minutes, a raven flew right over my head, looked down at me, went, and then again, could have been pure coincidence, but the answer subsequently turned out to be true 3 or 4 months later, right? So again, it's 50% chance, even chance that could, well, there's probably more factors in it because it was yes or no, right? So 25% chance that would have happened, right? Because there's the 1 out of 2. There's a 50% chance a hawk flies. Well, no, maybe it's a third. I'm like, there's a 16.7% chance that could have happened that way. Okay. Still, 1 out of every 6 times it's going to happen randomly. And the 3 options are obviously hawk, raven, nothing. Right. So anyway. Okay. So how did we start talking about the occult? Because of ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think ChatGPT, which wants to turn us all into occultists, apparently.
Or something does that's operating through ChatGPT. So how do you think all this stuff ties together? Because I think anybody who spends any more than 2 weeks seriously studying this topic is going to come to the conclusion very rapidly. It's not just nuts and bolts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't totally know what's going to happen, but I do think we're at a really interesting time because I think, like we've talked about before, I think that it's not just that something's here or that it's been here for a long time. I think that this is the nature of our reality. Like I really enjoy the phrase Josh Cutchin used in the title of his book, Ecology of Souls. I think that we are embedded in a much more dense ecology of souls than we are aware of. I think that our materialist paradigms are falling apart and that we're coming up against like big scientific paradigm shifts in terms of our understanding about who we are and what the nature of our reality is. And that all of this is also happening at this time when institutionalized secrecy has become so enmeshed in every single part of our world and our reality, but that as a result of that, our consensus reality is like really fraying at the seams. And that like, we're also at this kind of like cyclical generational fourth turning moment. And I think that just a lot is going to be revealed in the same way that like when there's an earthquake, a lot is revealed. Like, I think that there's a lot happening all at once, and that we're starting to see things being uncovered that have been there for a long time, but that maybe haven't been available to us. And I think that I don't claim to know the answers, and I am suspicious of anyone who does claim to know the answers. But I think we're about to go through some really crazy stuff, and we're in the midst of it right now. I think we're going through it right now as a species. And, I think that there's a lot of darkness and a lot of like really awful, scary stuff that's been kind of subverted and hidden and is like kind of a disease. And that is, and I think
metastasizing, right?
Yeah, and that there's but I also think that we have a collective immune system, and that not that humans have that. I think the planet has that. I think reality has that, and that like some big changes are going to come that are going to give us a chance to choose what we want to be and how we want to move forward. And that's about as that might sound really crazy to some people, but that's where I'm at with it. But as for any kind of like details of what I think is like very specifically happening beyond that, my ideas change on that day to day. And if anything, it's just like been a huge dose of intellectual humility to just recognize the extent to which like I don't know, I don't have the answers, I don't even have enough information to ask the right questions. And that might always kind of just be the case. But I still think that the process of seeking is a worthy one.
I think while dangerous, I think we've reached a point where it's probably less dangerous than trusting authorities, right? Mm-hmm. Which is experimentation. And I think, again, like you try to protect yourself using whatever, my Catholic upbringing, and maybe that's not enough to protect me, but I try different experiments to see what works and what doesn't. And I can only demonstrate it for myself. I can't demonstrate it for other people. But if it seems to work, I'll double down and kind of continue to look into it. And, there have been some tests that I've done that appear to have been successful, right? They could have also just been correlated, right? It had nothing, correlation does not imply causation, as we all know. But you just have to tread carefully, because anybody who claims to have the answers is going to scam you, right? And then even sometimes this phenomenon sometimes will deceive you.
Oh, yeah.
I can give you a really weird example if you want to hear it, but...
Sure.
So I had breakfast with a friend, and he had to go somewhere, pick up his nephew or something like that. He was going to come back. So I'm in Lafayette, California at this time, where that's not where I live, but it's where I was heading. So I walk up. I just decided to kind of walk up this hill, and I get to the top of the hill, and there's just this black chair just sitting there. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. So I just sit down in the black chair and kind of just relax a little bit. And in front of me on the field, there's I forget what type of flower it is, but there's literally like one yellow flower in front of the black chair. No other flowers anywhere else. And as I'm sitting there, a hummingbird flies directly in front of me and just hovers there, kind of back and forth, and then takes off. I'm like, well, that was weird. So eventually I get up and I walk down the hill, and I turn left, and immediately on my left is like a psychic reader's place that I hadn't noticed before. And I'm like, am I supposed to do something with this? Right? And once my friend got there, I'm like, hey, can you just do like a quick search on this particular place? And it turned out, like, from all the reviews, like total scammer, this and that. So I never went in there. But it felt like it was almost orchestrated to get me to go in there. Right? And this is kind of the person that says, hey, for like, $500, like, I can make sure this doesn't happen, and this and that. That sort of scam. Or it was maybe a test not to believe everything. Or it could just be all complete coincidences.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's always hard to tell.
Yeah. So, any final words for the audience?
Yeah, I would just say that, I like what you're talking about with experimentation and that sort of thing. I think that, like, for people I think the best thing you can do is to maintain a lot of intellectual humility, to not outsource your sense of truth or meaning to other people, and to, you can trust yourself. You need to understand that, like, you can be wrong, and you probably are wrong, but you can also, like, you're allowed to take your thoughts seriously and you're allowed to take your experiences seriously. And that I think that people make a lot more progress with understanding this phenomenon by engaging in their lives and not with a bunch of kind of like smoke and mirrors online. That this is something that is a part of our reality. It's all around us all the time. You don't need anyone else to tell you about it. You can go out and figure this stuff out on your own terms. And I think that that's probably the best way to do it.
All right, Kelly. It was an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much.
It was wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.